Don't surprise me. Go ahead.
I will try. First things off, welcome to the Swedish Transformers podcast with me and Linda. Hey.
I'm happy to be here.
Nice.
Yeah. I'm Linda. I'm the loyal Autobot.
And Gustav, the treacherous Decepticon. And with us is Bob.
Yeah.
I'm neutral. I
You're
don't want
neutral.
to
Yeah.
That was actually my first question. Which side do you prefer?
Well, as the writer of the Transformers for a long time, I really had to, look at it from both points of view. I had to, in order to write the book properly, I couldn't take real sides. I had to treat each side fairly.
Yeah, don't want to be biased.
No, I don't want people to think I was prejudiced in the way I wrote my stories.
But do you have a favorite character?
When I was writing the book, the character that I was able to develop the most, and I wrote some of my best stories that featured that character prominently, was Blaster. So that would be my favorite because of the stories that I wrote around him.
Yeah, I think you did a really nice cover with Blaster on the scraplets.
That is true. That is true. Yes.
I think it was issue 28 or something close to it. We did a whole episode on it in the beginning of the podcast.
You did? Really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that was one of my... well, the reason I did that cover, I mean, I as the writer, I wasn't really obligated to draw the covers, but I did do designs for most of the covers of the books that I wrote. And then those designs, those sketches were passed on to the artist. But that particular cover I drew because I wanted to show the artist who was drawing the interior of the book, Don Perlin, what the scraplets looked like. They were these mischievous little robotic creatures that were kind of like a virus, speaking of viruses these days. And I wanted to get across my idea of what these guys look like. So they were kind of cute but dangerous at the same time. And so I decided, well, the best way to communicate that to the artist was I'll draw the cover, and then I'll just let him see the cover, and then he'll be able to draw the characters the way I want him to be drawn when he draws the inside of the book. And that's how it worked out. So I drew that cover.
Hmm? Yeah, scraplets, they like small metallic goblins or something.
Exactly. Yes.
We will continue with the characters. What character do you feel represent you in the Transformers franchise?
I don't know if I have a good answer for that. I don't know if I was trying to write me into any of those characters. I mean, I suppose when it came to the Autobots, I was trying to write my my personal moral code, my code of ethics about good versus bad. I think. Going back to your first question, I guess I did side with I did take the Autobot side more than the Decepticons. I wasn't trying to ravage the Earth, steal all its resources, and enslave humanity. So I guess I was more on the Autobot side, who were mostly, but not all of them, trying to protect humanity from the Decepticons. So, but I don't know if I had any one particular Autobot that I most identified with as me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, reading the stories, they are actually more in time now than when you wrote them. The stories are, the issues are really present at this time.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. I mean, I was writing
the environment and everything.
Well, but all those were issues in the 1980s as well. I mean, I know you and Linda are on the younger side, and Linda, as Linda said, she wasn't even born when I was writing those stories.
Mm.
But I wasn't like looking into the future and deciding that one day the environment would be an issue, or viruses would be an issue, or I mean, these were like things that were current at that time that I was just drawing upon when I was coming up with my ideas for those stories.
Mm.
And before you came up with these stories, what did you do before the Transformers?
Well, I was working for Marvel for a number of years. So I started working at Marvel in 1976 as an editorial assistant. And then my jobs developed into becoming a freelance artist, going back on staff as an editor. I went back on staff for the third time in 1983 as a full editor. That means like I wasn't an assistant anymore. And I had my own line of books for a while, and that job evolved into becoming special projects editor, which meant I wasn't editing mainstream Marvel books. Like I used to edit Daredevil and Fantastic Four, monthly Marvel books. Well, those were taken away from me when I became special projects editor. So I was involved with different licensing partners, like Hasbro on the Transformers, for example, as well as other toy companies, movie companies that we were doing movie adaptations with, and eventually trading card companies. We did trading cards. A trading card something you got in Sweden?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, I was doing all of these side projects that were just kind of being concentrated within my office. So early on, when I came back as an editor in 1983, when I was there for about I don't know, 6 months or so, one of the new properties that Marvel was licensing was this new property called Transformers. So since I was already just a little bit involved in some of these special projects, the editor-in-chief at that time, Jim Shooter, got me involved in helping to develop Transformers.
Was this before Ghost Rider and Spider-Man, Avengers, and X-Men?
Yes and no.
Was it like in between there?
One of the things I did, among many things I did at Marvel, was when I went freelance around 1979, I think, to become a freelance artist for the second time for Marvel. I was the regular artist on the comic book Ghost Rider for about a year and a half. When that book came to an end, that's when I came back on staff as a full editor. Actually, would have been later than 79 when I started that, maybe around 81 or so. And then around 83, I came back on staff as a full editor. So I worked on Ghost Rider for a while. That ended. Decided it was time to get off the freelance artist treadmill where you get up at 9 in the morning and go to bed at 2 at night, try to complete all your work, and just get to a regular 9 to 5 job, and get some more normalcy in my life, which I succeeded in doing by coming back on staff as a full editor. And so some of the other things you mentioned, I became the Spider-Man editor around 1995 or late 94, much later in my career there. And after I left Transformers, I developed this new book called Sleepwalker, so I wrote that for a while, which was all freelance work, wasn't part of my day job, as well as Transformers. Transformers, writing it was freelance work, it was not part of my day job at Marvel.
Yeah. I had a little question before Gustav here, because I was digging a little bit in your past, and you call it you got first introduced to comics, what I've understood.
No, I was introduced to comics way before college.
Yeah, I thought so. I thought it was weird.
Yeah, no, I started reading comics as soon as I could read.
Yeah.
I had 2 older brothers, and they had comic books around the house, and so I was reading, looking at their comics. And the first comic book that I bought with my own money, my own allowance money, was a comic book called Justice League of America #6.
Already Justice League.
The name of the story was The Wheel of Misfortune. I still have that comic book. It's kind of pieces, but I still have it. That was from around 1991. So starting around then, I became a regular buyer and collector of comic books for many, many years. All my allowance money. Is allowance a Swedish term? Does that translate? Allowance?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So all my allowance money went to buying comic books for years.
Right.
And then when I got to high school, which was the 9th grade for me, I decided, well, I'm getting too old for this. I stopped buying comic books. And then when I got to college a few years later, a friend of mine who was into comic books reintroduced me to a couple of new comic books that I was unaware of because I had stopped collecting 6 years earlier, whatever it was. And that got me all excited about comic books again. So I started collecting again. Meanwhile, while I was in college, I was an artist on the college newspaper. So I hadn't completely lost my interest in comic book art. I continued being being an artist as much as I could be while working for the college newspaper.
Yeah, I read that you made some collaboration comic strips.
Yes, I did.
During college, yeah.
I sure did. 3 times a week, I was co-writing and drawing a comic strip in the college newspaper.
Nice.
What was the name of the first character you ever created?
That I ever created?
Yeah. that made it to a paper.
You ask tough questions. I don't remember.
Sorry.
I don't remember that either from my part.
I probably created a bunch of characters that I, long ago forgot because I was, 8 years old at the time or something. So I don't know about my first character. I mentioned earlier that I did create a comic book character for Marvel called Sleepwalker, that got published for about almost 3 years, and it still pops up every so often in Marvel Comics. So I was very, very proud of the fact that A, I was able to create the character, and B, that Marvel would agree to publish it, because it wasn't easy. This was in the early 90s. It wasn't easy then to get a brand new character published that wasn't already related to the X-Men or Spider-Man or some other pre-existing Marvel franchise. So there was that one I remember. I created that character.
Yeah, usually people are drawn to something that they already recognize.
Yeah, yes, that's true.
The Transformers, you got the job from Hasbro after the other previous editor had been rejected. Why did they agree more with your work?
Let me correct you there. I got the job from my boss, Shooter. So Jim Shooter, as the editor-in-chief at Marvel, had been working with Hasbro, I don't know for how long he'd been working with them, to develop this new property called Transformers into a storyline that could be published as a comic book and eventually be made into an animated TV series. So he hired a senior editor who had lots and lots of writing experience to help him develop the storyline, specifically to develop the characters for the Transformers. Now, again, I wasn't involved at this stage, but for whatever reason, Jim Shooter rejected most of what that writer wrote for the development of the characters, the character names that he came up with, the character profiles that he might have written. I don't know. I didn't see most of it. I do know that two of the names did survive from the previous editor/writer who came up with it. But in any case, in November of 1983, Jim Shooter had decided he was going to part ways with this particular writer and find another writer. So he came down the hallways at Marvel looking for an editor who had writing experience to pick up this project and develop these characters, and to do it over a weekend, basically. So this was maybe on a Wednesday or Thursday, and he needed to work by Monday because here in the United States, the following Thursday was a big holiday, Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is the kind of holiday where people, basically leave town. They go, if they live in another part of the country, they get on a train or a plane, they depart. So there's all this pressure to get this in on that Monday before the big holiday, because it was due at Hasbro. Hasbro needed it by a certain date to review all this work. So he was desperate to find somebody who was willing to develop these 26 characters. Originally, there were 26 Transformer toys and the first line of Transformers. So he went down the hallway, spoke to several different editors that had writing experience. I think about 2 or 3 at least. And they all rejected him. Like, no, we don't want to get involved in this. We're too busy. We have no interest in whatever they said. Finally, he got to me. So I was like about the 4th choice, maybe 5th. And when he got to me, as I said earlier, I was more of an artist. I've been doing freelance artwork here and there. I was not known as a writer, especially, although I'd written a little bit. So anyway, he got to me, and out of pure desperation, he said, "Bob, can you do this job over the weekend?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll do it." And I did it. So over the weekend, I developed the 26 characters. I wrote profiles for them. I renamed 24 out of the 26. Like I said, 2 of the names were kept. And that's Optimus Prime, and I think the other one was Hound. I think those are the 2 names that survived. But in any case, I developed all those characters and names, turned it into Jim Shooter. He liked it, and then he then presented all that material to Hasbro. So I wasn't really hired by Hasbro. although Hasbro was very happy with the results. So from then on, I had a long-term working relationship with Hasbro, turning in all of these profiles. I didn't have to go through Jim Shooter anymore. I would just write it up, have it typed up, and then it would be sent off to Hasbro for their executives to review and approve or ask for whatever changes they might want.
So Optimus Prime wasn't your name, and Hound either, but the other names you came up with, we have discussed some in detail on the podcast.
Okay.
We have discussed Ratchet, got the name from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, if I'm not wrong.
That is correct. Well, it comes from two sources.
Why did they reject the female Autobot?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Why did they reject the idea of a female Autobot?
Good question. So Hasbro was in the business of boys' toys and girls' toys. And these were boys' action figures. Now, I was very naive. I'm not a person from the toy industry. I'm the person from the comic book industry. So at the time, I just figured, well, you have all of these characters. You know, they're obviously male. Why can't we make a couple of female characters? And right away, I was told, no, you can't do that. These are boy action figures. So they all have to be male characters, no female characters. Now, as it turned out, like a couple of years later, the Transformers animated movie came out with a female Transformers character. But that was not my decision. I don't know what went into making that decision. But obviously, times had changed, and it was okay for there to be female Transformers.
Yay.
Yay. A blow for women's liberation in toys.
Yeah, yes, we want more.
Oh, and by the way, I should mention that the Hasbro marketing executive who was in charge of boys' toys at the time, who told me that I could not have a female character in the Transformers. She herself was female. You know, she was just. It wasn't like, you know, this is like only a guy thing. This is a company policy.
Yeah, I understand that too, that they, back in the time, I remember from my childhood from the 90s, that boys were blue and black and girls were pink and white and fluffy stuff and glitter and shit like that. I'm a very boyish girl, so I always went to the boys' toys when I was little. And my mom tried to buy me Barbies and shit like that. And I was like, no, I don't want. I want to play with my brother's toys. And of course, there was like He-Man and stuff like that.
Well, the one Transformers character that was developed for the movie, she was pink and lavender.
Yeah.
Pink and light.
Is mainly pink.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's I'm actually very happy that the toy industry is changing a little bit now. I understand still that it is a corporation that still has the boys' toys and girls' toys. That's just how the society is, and I totally accept that.
Right.
Another character we have discussed is Ironhide, that got his name from a TV show, if I'm not wrong.
That is correct. So Ironhide, the name came from a TV show from the 1960s that I occasionally watched. It was a police detective show called Ironsides. So Ironsides himself was he was paraplegic. He was in a wheelchair. So the name Ironside fit the fact that he was like in this steel wheelchair, getting around doing his detective business. And I just thought it had a good connotation, you know, Ironsides, Ironhide, just had a nice ring to it. So, and it's interesting talking to you know, the two of you, Linda and Gustav, because you know, I came up with all these names for American English-speaking audiences. So I don't know how a name like Ironhide or Ratchet sounds to people from other countries, or if other countries, when they produced Transformers toys, came up with alternate names that translated into their native languages. You know, so these names, I guess, worked very well in the United States because Hasbro kept using me to come up with more names. But I don't know how they translate across the pond, as they say, across the Atlantic.
Well, I can say that I'm also from Finland, so I speak two languages. And they usually translate it, what I've compared to Finland and Swedish and then to American, that they don't really translate the names unless the name actually means something bad in that language. That's when they're like, yeah, no, we can't have this. Just change the name, you know.
Right.
The pronounce is also changed so that if a very English name like Ironhide is like maybe Ironhide in Finland. Now I don't know, those who are Finnish will probably slaughter me for this, but like the pronouncement is a little bit changed from to the language. But as a child, you know, we didn't know what Ironhide meant or what Ratchet meant. When I was Googling Ratchet for the first time, I just got the tool and I was like,
Right.
oh.
I was going to say Ratchet was named after two things. It was named after the tool because Ratchet isn't somebody who fixes things, as well as the nurse Ratchet from, which is spelled slightly different from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Yes.
Yeah. But those were a little bit of surprises, at least back in the time when I didn't really know the English as well as I do today. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. One name that I know you changed this name from the first person's idea. Starscream's name wasn't really Starscream from the beginning, was it?
Well, I think Starscream's name was originally Oktar. That was not one of my names. That was from the previous writer. And maybe that's a good indication of why his work was found to be lacking by editor-in-chief Jim Shooter, because Oktar in English means nothing. It doesn't have any connotation to. I guess the writer thought it had some cool sound to it, but it doesn't mean anything. Optimus Prime. Optimus has meaning, or optimal has meaning, means like the best, you know, or getting the best effort out of something. And Prime means it's like most important. So there's something about Optimus Prime. Hound, if I got that one right, Hound is another word for dog. Oktar meant nothing. So I suppose most of the other names that he came up with were just these odd sounding names that didn't really mean anything. Whereas I was coming up with names that, even though Starscream by itself doesn't mean something, it has a connotation of meaning something. But Star has meaning and Scream has meaning. So I was able to put a lot of words together, like Starscream, Thundercracker, that gave an impression to, hopefully gave the right impression to anybody looking at the toy or reading the character in a book or something. And so it had some connection to the English language that people understood, whereas Oktar meant nothing.
Yeah, many of the characters actually lived up to their names too, and it's quite interesting.
Yeah, well, that was part of it as well. I mean, when I was coming up with the character personalities, either I would think of a personality and that would suggest a name, or I'd come up with a name and that would suggest a personality. So they would kind of work both ways.
There was a big connection to the toys in the Transformers stories. Did you have time to build a relationship with any character before they switched them out?
Well, it really sounds like you studied me very well, asking that question, because that was my biggest issue as a writer. As you might imagine, if one is writing a comic book with a character or a group of characters, the writer is interested in developing those characters and coming up with interesting storylines and interesting conflicts for those characters to go through. However, because Transformers was so successful as a toy, that within a short period of time, Hasbro was introducing new lines of toys every few months, like every 6 months or 3 months, or I don't know what the schedule was. So every several months, there'd be another 10 or 20 new characters. And I was sort of asked very, very gently but forcefully, you have to introduce these characters in the comic book. Because to Hasbro, the comic book only existed to help promote the toys. So I could not ignore all these new characters. I had to find room for them in the comic book. And the only way to find room for all these new characters is to shove all the old characters aside, especially the old characters that were no longer being produced after a year or two as a toy, because at that point, Hasbro really didn't care if those characters appeared in the comic book. They wanted to use the comic book to promote what they were selling in the toy stores. And so it did become an issue with me continuing to write this book, where every several months I'd have to shove a bunch of characters aside that I had been developing stories around to introduce a whole bunch of new ones.
Mm.
Yeah, I think you described the story after the 4-part mini beginning as a mess. Is that what you mean by that?
Okay, so the mini-series that began the Transformers, and just as an aside, we planned it as a mini-series, a 4-issue mini-series, because no one at Marvel had any way to predict how successful that the book would be and the toys would be. So Marvel made an initial deal with Hasbro to put it out as a 4-issue miniseries. So I was the editor of that miniseries. I was the natural choice to edit it because I'd already developed all these characters. So I had a good handle on the Transformers, much more so than any other editor at Marvel who had no idea what the Transformers were. So as editor, it's my job to have an artist and a writer write every issue and draw every issue. And so usually when you do a 4-issue miniseries, your plan as an editor is to use the same team of artist and writer. And that was my plan. So the artist was Frank Springer. The initial writer was Bill Mantlo. And I think Ralph Macchio might have scripted the first issue for Bill. But in any case, it was more than they could handle. Like, Bill just didn't want to continue with it because the mythology, the initial storyline of the Transformers, which was developed by Jim Shooter, by the way, that initial storyline encompassed, the Transformers coming to Earth and crash landing and bringing their Autobot Decepticon war to Earth, and all these new characters and all these humans that come into it. And it just, Bill was a very successful, very busy writer at Marvel. He just didn't want to continue with it. So over the course of 4 issues, I wound up using, I think, 3 different writers. And it got to the point where the writers weren't even coming up with the stories. I just was dictating the stories to them. I mean, they came up with the dialogue, but I was basically telling them, well, here's a plot that could work. And we would come up with a plot, and maybe I would talk back and forth with him. But my job as an editor is not to dictate the plot to the writer. That's the writer's job. So with the end of issue 4, Marvel decided, because it was so successful, the sales were so good, that it would continue as a regular monthly book. And again, by this time I became special projects editor, and I didn't edit regular monthly books anymore. I did edit miniseries like Transformers. So when I went to a different editor, the new editor asked me when he got the book, Bob, if you were the new editor of this book, starting with issue 5, what would you do? So I said, well, I would fire the writer that you have now and hire me.
Oh.
So that's what he did.
Yeah.
Because the writer that was working on the book up until that point, for the last issues 3 and 4, I believe, is Jim Salicrup. And again, Jim Salicrup, by the way, Jim Salicrup and I are friends. To this day, we're friends. As I like to call it, it was a mercy killing getting him off the book. We were doing him a favor. All right. So Jim, and Jim was my former boss as well. He was, when I was an assistant editor, he was my editor that I worked for. So we had a pretty close relationship. But book wasn't really for him. He wasn't that into it. So I took over writing the book with issue 5.
So that was a good event then. That
I guess
happened.
It worked out.
Yeah,
I worked on it for the next 51 issues, and whether fans liked it or not, who knows? But kept me busy. I think
it.
Liked it. Okay, well, I got one fan here who liked it. So anyway, kept me busy. Sold a bunch of books. Hasbro was happy. So everybody that was important seemed to be happy about it, for at least for those issues.
Yeah, and you went plus in stock markings as well, I hope.
Say it again.
You went up in the stock market as well. Sorry, my English. You went up with the.
Oh, okay. All right. Got it.
Sorry, my English. It's not the best today.
That's all right. You're doing much better than my Swedish would be doing. So keep going.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Or Finnish.
Can completely compare that.
Oh, exactly. Before you left the Transformers, you recommended Simon Furman to do the writing on the UK version and the US version.
Yeah.
Why did you recommend Simon?
Well, I had been trying to get off the comic book, the writing. I've been trying to remove myself as the writer of the comic book for maybe a year, because I had really burnt out on writing that book. Because what we talked about a little bit earlier, which was I kept having to introduce all these new characters every few months, and it just made it a very difficult book to continue writing. So, at least for me. So, meanwhile, Simon Furman had been writing fill-in issues for the British comic book market on Transformers. The British market, unlike the American market, put out comic books every week, whereas the American market typically put out a book every month. So they were on a different schedule, and without getting into all the details, they had to create extra stories in order to fulfill the British market weekly demands. And Simon was the writer on that. So he'd come to the Marvel offices in New York City a couple of times. I'd met him, and seemed like a nice guy. And it so happened in February of 1989, I went with a friend on vacation to England, and I arranged to meet Simon for lunch in London, where he lived and worked. And over that lunch, I said to Simon, say what?
He still lives there in England.
Oh, I know. Not in London anymore, but I've been to his house recently. So anyway, so Simon and I met for lunch, and I said, Simon, I want to get off this book. My editor keeps begging me to stay on it because he doesn't know who else he can get to write it. Would you like to take over the book? And without hesitation, he said yes. So when I went back to New York City to the Marvel offices, I went to my editor, Don Daly. I said, Don, I think I found a replacement for me. Simon, he'll do it. And Don thought that was an agreeable idea, and he accepted it. And so that's how I got off the book.
Oh.
That's how Simon got on the book. And Simon's been on the book almost ever since, which is great for Simon.
Yeah, on and off.
On and off, but he's still with it, in various ways. He's always with the Transformers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite story arc of the Transformers?
The stories that I wrote, my favorite one was The Smelting Pool, which was actually a two-part story, The Smelting Pool and The Bridge to Nowhere. And that described how, it did a few things. It was the first time that I introduced the concept of Cybertron into the storyline. Because up until then, all the stories took place on Earth. And it introduced some new characters, including Blaster. And it introduced the space bridge, which was another means that I created in order to get more Transformers into the storyline, because the initial storyline basically was limited to all those Transformers that showed up on the Ark, which was the spaceship that the Decepticons and Autobots traveled to Earth and crash landed and sat around for millions of years buried under a mountain somewhere, which was very limiting when you keep introducing dozens of new characters every year. So the space bridge was one of the devices that I came up with to introduce new characters. But the first issue in particular, Smelting Pool, was my favorite story that I wrote.
Yeah, we touched on that a little bit in our previous episode. We did a whole hour episode on the Decepticon spaceship Nemesis.
Oh, okay.
That's really fun. The worst nightmare arc you did, do you have a bad memory of the Transformers stories?
A bad memory? Well, I mean, just generally, toward the end of my run on the Transformers, I think I was running out of ideas, and I think it showed a little bit, especially the very last issue I wrote, which I also penciled part of, which was Transformers and Wrestlers. The name of the story was issue 55, and I don't remember. I think at the time there were a lot of people at Marvel Comics I wasn't one of them, but who would get together on a Friday night and go see a wrestling match. So it must have like infiltrated my thinking at the time. And so I decided to have Transformers mix it up with some human wrestlers somehow. I forget the details of the plot. But that's not one of my favorite stories. But that was my last story, and that was probably the right time to leave after that one.
Yeah, I mean, you worked with Transformers already like 20 years up until then.
No.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No, I worked on Transformers from November of 1983 when I first started developing the character profiles and the names until the spring of 1989.
It's still a long time.
Oh yeah. Not quite 20 years.
But you did a guest appearance in 2006.
I'm sorry, say again?
You did a guest appearance at IDW, if I don't remember wrong.
I still show up at Transformers conventions and do interviews like this and panels, and I showed you that illustration I just completed for a website. But I wouldn't call that working on the Transformers.
But I mean, you did the movie homage.
For IDW, they put out their version of the Transformers animated movie that came out in 1986. Back around, I think, around 2008, I think. IDW contacted me to write the script for their adaptation of the movie. So I did that. So that was the only time.
Was that the last thing you did with Transformers?
Say that again, please.
What is the last thing you did with Transformers?
The last
officially.
I don't know. Occasionally I do a commission or I go to a convention when conventions weren't locked down. And I showed you before we started, I did a Transformers-like illustration for a website that is going to feature me as for a Transformers event that they're planning, and they wanted to do a giveaway. And so it's not a specific Transformer, but it's a Transformer-like character that I created for the giveaway. Did you want to see it for your audience?
Yeah.
Please.
Okay,
yes.
Let me share it.
Yeah.
I think it's still on my screen somewhere. Okay, give me a moment, please.
Yes.
And it'll help promote this website, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, exactly. Promotion.
We haven't picked a date yet for the event, but here it is. Start sharing.
Do you know about when it's going to kick in?
Probably within the next month.
Yeah.
I think he has to work out the mechanics of getting it printed.
So about when this podcast comes out, it might be out.
Yes. So it's not showing up yet?
Yep, we can see it.
You can see it?
Yes.
Okay, so those people out there who are familiar with the initial run of the Transformers back in the 1980s, this illustration is an homage. It's based on the cover to Transformers number 5, where it said Transformers are all dead. And this one says Comixplex connecting fans, creators, sellers. And Mark Bright was the artist of the original cover, did a phenomenal job. And it's a classic cover. So I will stop sharing that for the moment. There you go.
Yeah.
Yay. Thank you for sharing.
I have just 2 more questions before Linda will have a couple of artist questions for you.
Okay.
I guess you can agree that the Transformers has helped your career.
Yes.
Yes. But in hindsight, would you do this all over again if you had a choice?
Well, where I am today is very different than where I was 35 or so years ago. So I probably would. I mean, Transformers is a great opportunity. The great thing about working for Marvel, I worked there for almost 20 years, is that if you showed that you had talent and you showed that you had ambition, and you would get a lot of opportunities. A lot of opportunities would come your way, and it was up to you, up to me, the individual, whether to jump on those opportunities and take advantage of them or not. So as I told you earlier, I was not the first choice to write the Transformers character profiles and come up with their names. But the opportunity came along, and I was looking to become more of a writer. And I thought, well, this is a good opportunity. Let's see what happens. So it worked out great. I was able to get on this property, which turned out to be a super successful franchise, a super successful toy and animated show and comic book, and eventually live action movie series. And I was able to get there from the beginning. And so knowing what's become of it, I'd say I'd certainly do it again. There was really no downside to working on it. It was a lot of fun.
But if you did it all over again and Hasbro or nobody was holding your back, what would you change?
Oh, see, now these are always interesting questions. Like, what would you do different? Or what story did you want to write that you never wrote? Or, I mean, you have to remember, I did all of this over 30 years ago. So what would I change? I don't know. I don't really dwell on, I should have used this character instead of that character, or I should have had the Transformers go to this planet instead of that planet, or these are stories that are, I finished them, I packed them away, and then I moved on to the next thing. And
no regrets then.
No, not really. I mean, I don't think. It is possible to write something and you look back years later and say, "Oh, I shouldn't have written that." Well, first of all, I don't go back and reread all the Transformers comics from 35 years ago. I mean, I've looked at them here and there on occasion, not all of them. So maybe if I sat down and read all 48 issues that I wrote, I think I wrote 48 total. If I read all 48 issues, I'm sure I'd go through it and I'd find things that I would cringe at today. I'd say, "Oh, I shouldn't have written it that way," or "That's a bad characterization for this character or that character. I'm a better writer now," but I don't have any regrets. I'm not going to go back and excavate the past like that. And as a comic book writer, your job is to write a story, put it behind you, and then write the next month's story. You can't really dwell too long on a particular story because you're on a monthly schedule. So I was really looking forward to what I got to do next as soon as I finished a story. And then when I got off Transformers, I wasn't looking back at Transformers. I was looking forward to what am I going to do next, which became that comic book I mentioned earlier, Sleepwalker. So again, is there anything I would do different? If I took several days out of my schedule and reread all the comic books, I suppose I could give you more of an answer. But overall, I think the stories speak for themselves. If people want to read them today and say, they're not good for this reason or that reason, and also, the other thing is that there are different standards. Today's standards are different than the standards from the 1980s. So you always have to be careful when you look at something that's old and compare it to current political correctness, current social correctness, current gender correctness, however you want to put it. These are all products of their day. So
so the test of time, you can say.
Like I like to point out, like one of my favorite comedies, movie comedies, is a movie called Animal House. Have either of you ever seen Animal House?
Not familiar.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, well,
it might have another name here in Sweden.
It might,
we changed the name.
Animal House came out around 1979. It starred John Belushi, if you know who John Belushi is. I don't know if that's an actor you know. But anyway, it's a very raunchy comedy that takes place on a college campus in the early 1960s. All right, it's hysterical, at least by American standards. It's a very funny movie. And it was a very successful movie when it came out in around 1979. It could not possibly be made today. There is not one scene in it that wouldn't be, considered sexist or racist or whatever you want to call it. It would all be like watered down and neutered because it wouldn't meet today's standards. Now, actually, the movie itself is not meant to be sexist or racist, but the way characters are depicted to get the point across, it wouldn't work in today's environment. So anyway, you have to always be careful when you look back at something that's decades old and compare it to the standards of today, whether you would do it the same way today. Because probably I would change a lot of things if I were writing those stories today.
Yeah, that movie reminds me of the movie we watched, Linda. The Party with Peter Sellers.
Oh yeah.
Which movie was that?
Pass the test of time either.
The Party.
The Party. Oh, okay. I've never seen
where
that.
they took the elephant into a swimming pool, and it's like, that wouldn't work today, and
yeah, that would be cruelty to animals, probably.
Yeah, and it's
Get in
like
trouble for that, right.
Yeah, and there were also some sexist things there. It's fun to, I mean, we do compare that because that's what we do in the other podcasts that we have, and of course we have been comparing some comic books to not really on the podcast but for ourselves, like this happened then and now is now, and back then things were different. A lot of these comics books were before I was born, and when I was growing up my mom forced a dress on me. She would never do that today. It's different today.
We always, when we have a guest, we let the previous guest ask the next guest a question. So I will now split my screen. Yeah, I think it's a good position now, actually.
Okay, do it.
Okay.
So this is Andrew Wildman who's going to ask you a question.
Okay.
We will talk with Bob Budiansky, and we would like you to ask him a question. What would you like to ask him?
Well, how many more different Transformers did he have up his sleeve that never saw the light of day?
Well, interesting question. I might actually have something of an answer for that. Let me see. So in this folder here, I have a lot of original Transformers materials, including I've talked about the treatment with the original character names in it. This is the original treatment, a storyline that Jim Shooter wrote. Mentions Oktar. If you look really close, you can see Oktar's name is crossed out and Starscream is there. See that? So anyway, so I had a piece of paper from way back when, and I don't know if it's in this folder or not. It might be. I had a piece of paper that I used to just write names that I thought would make good Transformers names. And it was like a yellow piece of paper like this. By the way, this is my original writing of how I wrote up the Transformer profiles. So this one that I'm holding up now is for Decepticon, Jaguar, and Robot. The original name was Stalker. That became Ravage.
Oh.
Right. So I would write it up on these yellow legal pads, and then eventually I would get it typed up. So there was I don't know if it's in this, I might not have it up here. Oh well. Well, in any case, on one of these yellow sheets of paper, I had about 4 columns of names, just names. And from those, I would just come up with names and just write them. So there must have been like 100 names, at least, in these 4 columns of names that I wrote up. And I would pick out names when I thought they were appropriate. Oh, this name fits this character. So I don't really have an exact answer for Andrew. I wish I did. Sorry, Andrew. But I kind of wrote to order. You know how when you order food from your favorite takeout restaurant, you say, "Oh, I'd like I don't know what kind of restaurants you have in Sweden where you get takeout food, but let's say you have
it's the same as in the U.S.
Let's say you have an Indian restaurant that you like, okay? Indian food. So I'd like to have your chicken biryani, and I'd like to have lamb shag, and so on and so forth. They cook to order. They don't have it sitting on the side ready to give it to you. They will make the dish to order. Well, that's how I worked on the Transformers. I didn't have like a whole bunch of characters I wanted to create. I waited until Hasbro gave me a list of all the new characters, and then they would give me model sheets of the new characters, what they look like. Early on, they gave me the actual toys, because the toys came from Japan originally. They were just adapting them. So they would give me something like this, a model sheet. See that? Okay. Yeah. And they would show me the different versions of the character. Okay. Here's another version, I think, of the same character, different transformation. So this character became Scalor. Okay. So anyway, they gave me this model sheets, and based on what these model sheets showed me, and whether it was an Autobot or a Decepticon, I would come up with names and profiles. So I cooked to order, in other words. I didn't have all this stuff sitting on the sidelines, except for some names, perhaps. Waiting to create new characters. I was waiting to see what Hasbro would present to me, and then kind of rise to that challenge, come up with names and character profiles. But good question, Andrew. Keep up the good work.
Now, Linda, I leave it to you.
Yes. No, it's my turn, and I have some very, very difficult questions for you.
I thought I was done. That's okay. Go ahead, Linda.
Let's see. Let's take a few writing questions first, just to mess it up a little bit. What made you want to write from the beginning? Was it really the Transformer stuff that came first?
Well, actually, I started writing for Marvel when I was on Ghost Rider as an artist. So,
oh, yeah.
At some point during my Ghost Rider run, I got partnered with a new writer, Mark DeMattis, also known as J.M. DeMattis, and we kind of hit it off as a team. And so I started plotting the stories with him. So this is a few years before Transformers. So I kind of learned how to structure stories working with Mark, and it was a great collaboration. Now, he still scripted all the stories. Then sometime around that time, maybe even before that time, I plotted a couple of Avengers stories with another writer. So I co-plotted that. So anyway, I'd already gotten my hands writing different things at Marvel. So it didn't start with Transformers, but that gave me the writing bug, so to speak. In other words, oh, writing, I like this. I can continue doing this. The other thing was a bit more practical minded, pragmatic, which is when I was an artist for Marvel, that was my full-time job. So when I was drawing Ghost Rider, that's all I did pretty much. I was a freelance artist. I worked either out of my apartment or in an art studio with a couple of other artists. And all I did was draw Ghost Rider and try to do one book a month. When Ghost Rider ended and Marvel, Jim Shooter invited me to become a full editor at Marvel. Like I said earlier, I wanted a more normal lifestyle. I realized, well, I could do a little bit of artwork, but I certainly can't do a full-time editor job and also draw a monthly comic book anymore. So there was no way for me to continue being a full monthly artist, which was fine. However, I could write. Writing, this is no slam on writers, but writing a comic book takes far less time, at least for me, and I think for almost anybody else who could do both. Writing takes far less time than drawing a comic book. So the way I like to put it is, when I went to work in the mornings, I would commute to work, I would take a train to work, and from the train station to the Marvel office was about a 10 or 15-minute walk. So while I'm walking to work in the morning, I can't take out a piece of paper and start drawing a comic book. Not while I'm walking. However, I could think of a plot for a story and then go home that night and type it up. So there are all these advantages to being a writer over being an artist if you had a full-time 9-to-5 kind of job as an editor. So that was another reason I wanted to get into writing, because it allowed me to do more freelance work.
Where did you usually get your inspiration from when you tried to find out these plots and stuff like that? Do you have any favorite writer or any favorite books maybe back then or now?
Well, that's two questions. Okay, so
sorry.
as a comic book reader, my favorite writers at that time and growing up, my favorite writers from DC Comics were people like Gardner Fox and John Broome. And they wrote books like Justice League of America, The Flash, Green Lantern, The Atom, Hawkman, Mystery in Space, which starred Adam Strange. And then as I got older, as a kid, as a reader, I moved over to Marvel, and the only writer at Marvel pretty much was Stan Lee. So I became a big fan of his writing. And then once I got back into comics again when I was in college, Roy Thomas was a big influence in my, as far as comic book writing. So as far as inspiration for stories, I was just absorbing whatever was around me, whether it was like something on the TV news or something I read in a newspaper or something I saw in a movie or on a TV show or I read in a book. You know, wherever I was looking, I was being affected by my surroundings. In fact, I remember thinking at times, I wish I had more worldly experience, like I had traveled more, because I'm just this guy living in New York City, you know, working all day, and you know, I don't get around that much. I don't have that much experience of the rest of the world. It would help to inform me with more ideas for my writing. But still, I was able to come up with ideas one way or another and put them into stories. So that was that. And as far as some of the names that I came up with, a lot of it, I mentioned earlier that I was a civil engineer in my college background. So a lot of my science ideas were able to translate into some of the names and profile language, you know, some of the writings that I put into the profiles for the characters. I had no other use for my civil engineering science background, but it did come in handy when I wrote up those profiles and came up with some of those names.
Yeah. We are going to the artist questions today. Sorry, my throat is totally killing me today. So I guess you prefer traditional inking when it comes to drawing. But do you also work with digital, or does it depend what you work on when you switch to digital to inking or traditional?
Well, I don't know how to do, I mean, not that I couldn't learn it, but I don't have the tools to do digital inking. So I ink, it's traditional. Also, I'm inking for commissions. I don't draw comics anymore. So if I'm doing a commission, doing it digitally doesn't help me. You know, the person who I'm doing the commission for wants a piece of paper, and they don't want to print out of a piece of paper. They want a piece of paper with your actual pencils and inks on that piece of paper. So it doesn't make any sense for me to do digital. Although, you know, it might help in terms of I could sketch it out and then print it out and copy it and so on. But
yeah,
I'm still doing everything traditionally, except I showed you earlier that Comixplex cover. So I did the traditional pen and ink. Here it is.
Yeah.
Okay. But then I scanned it in and I did all the coloring digitally.
Yeah. So usually colors digital and the line art is traditional inking.
Usually, but again, if somebody's asking me for a commission, which they ask me for commissions with color, I'll take out my watercolor set and then I'll color.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
I am very versatile. I can, you know, whatever the job requires, I'm ready.
Beautiful. So what kind of inking tools do you use?
All sorts.
All sorts. Pencils and pens.
I'm a relatively new inker. So
Yeah.
I feel I still have a tremendous amount to learn. So here, look, let's see. I don't really use it. I mean, these are all these different pens. This is a Uniball Vision Elite.
Yeah.
I don't really use this much for inking. These are Copic pens.
I have those too. They're beautiful.
So these come in handy for Transformers because it's a very rigid line.
Yeah.
And with robotic figures, you want to have a certain stiffness to the lines. This is a Pentel brush pen.
Yeah.
Okay. This is pretty good. Get a lot of use out of this.
Oh, Pentel. Okay.
Yeah. It's made in Japan. Has a Japanese symbol on the front. So this is good. But recently, I've discovered this is great for like when I go to a convention. Oh, also this pen I've discovered recently from Walter Simonson mentioned it. A Mangaka flexible pen.
Yeah.
So this has a point, but it's a pretty flexible point. So you can get different line thicknesses out of this. So this is good. But recently, since I've been working at home more, these are all good for conventions, but I can carry these around with me easily to conventions for doing sketches at conventions. But anyway, recently I've discovered that actually I work best, I get my best quality work if I go the old-fashioned route.
Oh,
you know,
fountain pens.
No, these aren't fountain pens. These are crow quills and hawk quills. These are pens that dip into ink.
Oh.
So
really hardcore then.
Point. This is just the pen point. Here's a bottle of ink. Windsor and Newton in this particular case.
The good one.
most of that cover I just showed you, that Comixplex cover, was done with this pen point.
Yeah.
Okay, and a quality. I'm trying to hold it so you can see it.
Is the brush? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Windsor
which
Newton
size?
2 brush,
Okay.
sable brush. So these are the best tools still for me, but that doesn't mean anybody out there who wants to ink shouldn't experiment and figure out what's best for them.
Yeah, of course. I have also a bunch of different inking tools in my drawer.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I travel, especially if I go to other countries, unlike earlier when I said, when I was writing Transformers, I didn't travel much. I've traveled a lot since then. So if I pass an art store in another country, and I'll see a pen, I'll say, oh, I've never seen that pen before in my country. Let me buy that. And
Yeah.
I'll bring it home and I'll try it and see if it works, if it helps me.
Yeah.
So I've been collecting all sorts of things. It's good to experiment and see what everybody's comfortable with different tools.
Of course.
They're not all, not one size fits all. That's an expression we have here in the States.
Oh yeah, usually also, just saying this quickly, but like usually when I see big artists making like great inking or whatever, and then a lot of people are like, oh, this specific ink pen will make me professional and will make me
Doesn't
do
work
this.
that way.
It doesn't. It really doesn't.
In fact, you mentioned something. So like I mentioned this Pentel brush pen.
Yeah.
This pen, and there's another pen that I have somewhere here. I think, is this it? No, it's not it. I don't want to waste your time too much, but there's another another Pentel pen.
Yeah.
And the reason I found out about this is because probably like 7 or 8 years ago on a Facebook page, an artist mentioned these pens. And I asked, or he showed these pens or something. I asked him, I contacted him, I said, what are those pens that you're using?
Mm.
So it is good to see like a professional using some tool that looks interesting and getting the name of it and trying it out for yourself. So I wouldn't know of the existence of this pen if I hadn't talked to this particular artist about it. The artist's name is Dan Panogian.
Mm. Yeah, sometimes you can really find some good pens that you didn't even know existed, and sometimes you find crap. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. When it comes to digital, I first believed that I have to have this humongous drawing tablet. And now when I work professional, I'm just using, I don't know, what tablet do you use?
You asking me?
Yeah.
I don't use a tablet.
You don't?
I don't draw.
Oh, so when you color,
I don't draw. I color.
Yeah, so when you color,
I don't use a tablet. I just go to Photoshop and color. That piece I showed you before was all in Photoshop, just on my desktop.
So you don't use any tablet at all
color? If I were doing, like, it sounds like you do this much more regularly than me.
Yeah.
If I were doing more work than I am, especially coloring work, I would probably invest in a tablet.
Yeah.
But I just don't do enough to make it necessary.
Yeah, of course. I'm just using this tiny little Wacom tablet when I draw my stuff.
There you go.
Yeah, I noticed
that. When I decide to buy something, I'll consult with you and get your opinion about what I should get.
Just get this one. It's totally perfect. It's small. You can take it with you anywhere. It holds, and I'm like, I know that there's some artists that are like, oh, you're using this little piece. Like, it's good enough. You don't have to. Size doesn't matter when it comes to tablets.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's the quality. Wacom is good. I had some Trust tablet before that broke in the most terrible way and gave me nightmares, and I will never use Trust ever again when it comes to tablets, at least. But yeah, like
I'm always learning about new tools.
Yeah, me too.
Happy to try out different things. A tablet's more of an investment, so I haven't gotten there yet. But one of these days I might.
One day, yeah.
Yes.
Well, the colors are amazing, so maybe you don't need one. Maybe you're just so hardcore.
Well, the colors are the same whether you're using a tablet or whether you're just using your desktop.
Mm.
You're still using the same spectrum of colors. It doesn't change.
Of course. Yeah.
The only thing that changes is the tools. I mean, I'm using this mouse to paint with. And you're using what do you call it?
A drawing tablet.
No. I'm using the stylus.
Oh yeah.
Like a pen point.
Mm-hmm.
or a brush point. But so that's really, it's just the tool that's different. But the colors are the same. Colors are all the same.
Of course, yeah. Next question. Where was I? I completely lost myself into art right now.
We can have a side discussion on art tools.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to bore your audience too much.
Let's see. What kind of is there any artist that you look up to?
Well, over the years, I was mentioning earlier about the artists who about the writers who I admired when I was growing up reading comic books. So there's certainly a lot of comic book artists that I've admired over the years as well. And so when I was growing up, I was admiring Carmine Infantino, Gil Kane. They mostly drew for DC Comics back then. When I moved over to Marvel, Jack Kirby, John Romita were very impressive. And as I got older, I learned to appreciate Jack Kirby much more than I did when I was a child, because Jack Kirby, although he didn't draw traditional looking characters, he kind of threw out the whole idea of anatomy and realism in drawing people, which is fine, because he more than made up for it in dynamics, in layout, in storytelling. Nobody was his equal in telling powerful, kinetic, energy-driven stories. So he was great. And then when I got back into comics in college, there were these new artists that I was not familiar with who were very influential, mostly John Buscema. He was my biggest influence probably. And then Neil Adams. And then once I got into the industry, there was a whole bunch of artists I worked with, but I've always admired Jim Lee's work once he became a thing, once he became a professional in comic books. So those are guys whose work I've liked, like Frank Cho. He's really good. I don't think I've ever bought a comic book by him, but I have some of his books, some of his art books. And other than that, I mean, outside of comics, there's lots of artists that I like.
Nice. Yeah. Do you feel that your art has been, or how do you feel that your art has been developed throughout the years, from the beginning till now?
How has it developed? It's gotten better.
Yeah, that's good.
I don't know. It's like when people say, I don't know if I'm assuming you're a pretty good artist yourself.
Enough.
And I don't know how it is with you, but over the years, people have said to me, "Oh, you're such a good artist. You must have been born with that talent." And my opinion is, no, you're not born with any talent.
No.
You have to practice. It's all about practice. Practice and interest. You have to be interested in the subject, and then you have to practice a lot to get good at that subject. So if you practice, you'll be born with that talent too. As if you were born with it. But you don't just show up as an artist someday. You have to really work at it. So I've been around a few years, and I still practice. I draw. I take an art class every week. Sometimes twice a week, a figure drawing class online these days. And so I'm always trying to improve.
That's really good. Yeah, figure drawing. I miss that stuff.
I should say that going to Marvel when I got out of college was the best art school possible, because I got to work with these great artists and two especially great art directors, Marie Severin and John Romita. Mostly with Marie. Marie Severin was terrific. She was the best teacher possible.
Beautiful. Yeah. I'm pretty much self-taught. The
like
school
me.
System failed me. Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty much self-taught as well. I didn't go to arts.
Oh yeah, you did. Oh yeah, okay.
No, I told you, I went to college. I was a civil engineering major. The high school I went to specialized in science. So I took art classes here and there, but I didn't go to art school.
Yeah.
So
of course. Yeah.
I was self-taught pretty much as well. But even when you're self-taught, and I'm guessing the same thing for you. You meet people, you meet teachers, you meet other artists, and you learn things.
Yeah.
Not just yourself, but from other people.
I've taken some classes myself too, through internet and stuff like that, like from Aaron Blaze, who is with the Disney. I took some online courses from there and stuff like that. That's how you learn, like.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah. when you started to draw Transformers in the beginning, was there any part that you thought were like hard to get right, like for example perspective or stuff like that?
So just to make it clear, I was the writer on Transformers. I drew some of the covers.
Yeah, that's
Only
that's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah. So I never liked drawing robots. I have to be honest. Robots are there's a lot of reference material you have to consult with to make sure you get the robot looking just the right way. Like the Transformer looks like this, and you have to have all these parts fitting in each other. And so I was never a big. So I know there's probably several generations of artists who grew up reading Transformers. All they want to do is draw robots, and they're terrific at it. But when I was working on the Transformers as a writer and as an editor, the artists that we had working on the books were all professional artists and all did a really fine job, but they weren't thrilled drawing Transformers. They would much rather draw human beings. As difficult as it is to draw human beings, once you understand how to draw a human, you can pretty much apply that to drawing any size or shape human, whether it's a petite, little girl versus the Hulk, they all have arms and legs, and you could distort them in different ways to make characters of different sizes and shapes. But with Transformers, you had to follow very specific, detailed model sheets to make sure they looked correct. Yeah. So as far as drawing the Transformers, I've gotten pretty good at it over the years, but I never drew them a lot. And I think it's like any other. It's like anything, any of the skills about drawing. Once you've mastered perspective and foreshortening, drawing a Transformer is not difficult. It's just a little painstaking, but you have to refer to all this reference.
Yeah.
So there you go. So here, I'll show you something else.
Ooh.
So in coming up with that illustration of that fake Transformer I showed you earlier, so I had to design this character. What's he going to look like? And so, here's my fourth or fifth draft of the design. Okay. So to make this design work, obviously I have to draw in a three-dimensional manner, meaning I have to understand some perspective, some foreshortening to make it effective. And anyway, it just comes with practice. Once you master those fundamentals, you can apply it to anything, including drawing one of these.
Yeah.
What name have you given this character?
Well, I didn't give the character the name. That's the website. The guy whose website this is appearing on is naming him. And I believe the name of the website is Comicsplex. I think his name is Comicsbot.
Okay.
Comicsbot.
Comicsbot or Comics Max. I think it's Comicsbot. Actually, he brought that up in one of his emails to me about his name. He said, I think I'm going to call him Comicsbot. I said, well, I was going to call him Frank, but if you want to call him Comicsbot, you can go ahead and do that. I was just joking. I did make that joke.
It would have been beautiful.
His name is Frank. Frank the robot.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yeah, those were pretty much all of my questions for the art. Any projects? Any more projects that you want to mention, or those were those?
I don't really do too many projects these days. I just do commissions. So I'm not, there's nothing for me to promote. Like, I'll show you. Like, right now I'm finishing up. It's taking me forever. 2 commissions for Ghost Rider. So here's one. Okay.
Nice.
This is based on a Ghost Rider cover. This is a recreation of a Ghost Rider cover that was originally drawn by Gil Kane, artist that I mentioned earlier. And this one's done. This one's pretty much done. Some minor details I have to fix or finish. And this is another Ghost Rider for the same client. Okay, this is a recreation of a Ghost Rider cover that I drew. So this is mostly done. I'd have to, almost all the background around the figures and the skull is black, so I have to fill it in with a lot of black.
Oh yeah, that's gonna take a lot of ink.
Then it'll be pretty much done. So
how many grams is that paper, by the way?
How many what?
How many grams is that paper?
I don't know.
Or how thick it is?
It's not the metric system.
Oh yeah, I forgot. What kind of paper?
We call it Bristol board here. So this is Bristol board paper. So it's a thick paper, and whether it's You know, I don't know how. I don't even know if we measure in grams here. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Usually,
Let's say maybe 400 grams.
In the States, they measure paper in pounds, which is, I guess, how much weight it could take.
Yeah.
So this might be, I don't know what, but I really don't know what it is. I don't know.
Okay. Just curious.
Like I get some poster prints made. I'll show you in a second.
Yeah.
Okay. So speaking of the original inspiration for that Comixplex cover, this is the original cover there. Okay?
Yeah.
I made it into poster print. So this is poster paper. This is called 100-pound paper.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're not in the gram system. But this 100-pound paper, which is still pretty stiff, not nearly as stiff as this paper that I just showed you here.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But in any case, now we're getting technical. I'm sure we completely bored your audience by now.
Take the silence. That's
I
nice.
love it. Yeah, I have a question also. If some of our fans would like to order something from you, a commission, where do they go? Where can they reach you?
I think the best way for them to reach me, and actually many people have reached me this way, is to look me up on Facebook.
Yeah.
Okay, and send me a message through Facebook, and I'll get back to them. That's how people find me all the time.
I will definitely ask you for a commission later.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you have other ways to reach me besides Facebook, but Facebook works. You know, is a pretty effective way to reach out to me, and I can guarantee that you will not confuse me with any other Bob Budiansky out there on Facebook. I think I'm the only one.
Yeah, I think I have you on Facebook too. I think
Yes.
I put you there before this. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Will you ever come to Sweden? When can we
I'd
meet?
love to. If we could ever travel again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. How are things in Sweden? How are things normally in Sweden?
It depends when you come. On
Well,
summer,
I'd
it
come in
might be
February. I
hot.
probably would make it in a warmer month.
Yeah. Okay. Well, summer. It's
Then
chill.
June to August.
Yeah. If
Yeah.
you come to Gothenburg, it's chill. You know, it's good. It's like a big little city.
Where are you located? You're in Gothenburg?
Yeah, I'm Gothenburg. Yeah,
And where,
just
and
outside.
Where are you?
I'm in the south, more close to Malmö.
Okay. Okay. Well, if I ever make it there, I'd be happy to look you up. I'll tell you a story about that. So I was at a convention in London, I think in 2014. And I think it was was it a Transformers? No, I think it was just a basic comic book convention. So I met a fan of mine came to me and said he'd like me to do a commission for him. I didn't have the time while I was at the convention. He was from Hungary. So I said, okay, well, I'll put you on my list, but I do have a list of people waiting for their commissions. Put you on my list. So it turned out, like the following year, by this time, his friend, also from Hungary, had also gotten in contact with me, who also wanted a commission. So I said to him, okay, I'll put you on my list. Following year, my family and I decided we're going to take a vacation to Central Europe. So I made sure I finished both of their commissions. And the first night we landed in Budapest, Hungary. We met them for drinks. I met them for beers, and went out to dinner with. We went out to dinner with one of them, and I gave them their commissions. How's that for service?
Yeah, that's something different.
I brought it right to them.
I would
Next
say
time you come
epic.
to Sweden, I'll treat you on a beer in a good bar
Okay,
here.
well, I'd love that. Yeah. So
Yeah.
the funny thing was, these gentlemen brought me to a beer store, a beer cafe, or whatever we called it. And we got there, and I guess they have different brands that they come and go. And we wound up ordering a beer that was from the United States.
Of course.
I was kind of disappointed, you know. I was waiting for
No.
Hungarian beer.
We have actually a few good brewers here in Gothenburg. They're
bet
always
you
coming
do.
up with some new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my daughter lives in Berlin, and they have wonderful beers in Berlin.
Oh, yeah.
The
Beer is the
Oktoberfest.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had great beers all through Europe. Any case,
Yeah.
something to look forward to. So yes, I would love to come to Sweden someday.
You're always welcome. Maybe not now, but
Maybe not now.
After the shitstorm is over.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the beginning of the episode, we always have a quote from the Transformers franchise. Linda usually does it, but will you do the honor and take a quote from the Transformers?
You want me to quote the Transformers, huh?
Yeah, something from the franchise.
Okay, well, I don't have these things memorized. So I'm going to pull a book at random here. Let's see, a couple of books.
This is interesting.
All right, give me a moment.
Yeah, take your time. Choose a good one.
I'm pulling up this one here, okay?
Yeah.
The mechanic strikes again. So let's see. Okay, the quote is, await new orders. Wheeljack is working on way. Well, that doesn't even make sense. There's a mistake here.
Oh, no.
Okay, I'm going to have to edit it.
Yeah.
Await new orders. Wheeljack is working on a way to locate power booster rod. Oh, I know. It's not a mistake. It's a Dinobot. The Dinobots never spoke English very well. So that's why it's written that way.
Yeah.
I credit the writer for writing it properly. That was me.
Yeah, good one.
Good one, writer.
Read the way it was supposed to read. You have to edit some of this out. Await new orders. Wheeljack is working on way to locate power booster rod. That was
that
was nice.
It was really unexpected quote, I must say.
Yeah.
Well,
which Dinobot is it from? Do you know?
Grimlock.
Grimlock.
Grimlock, of course. Yay.
Yeah. Right up here.
Yeah.
There you go.
Sometimes when I read these old G1 these old G1 comic books, also the new ones, I usually try to search for misspellings and stuff like that.
Oh.
And then I always send them to Gustav.
You have a
Look what
strange
I
sense
found.
of humor.
I'll tell the letterer. I'll contact the letterer and tell him he made a mistake 30 years ago.
Yeah, I'll send them to you from now on.
Yes.
Yeah, that was pretty much it.
Yeah. Did you have fun being on this podcast?
Yes. My pleasure. I had a good time.
I hope we didn't
Asked
bore you
great
to death.
questions. You asked a lot of fun questions. I hope I was able to give you some good answers.
Really
yes.
good answers.
Mm-hmm.
And let me know what. See, just as a little side note, because I gave Simon the opportunity to take over writing the Transformers from me, every time we get together, he owes me a beer.
Of course.
How many beers have you got in this way?
I've lost count, but it's for infinity. He has to buy me a beer.
It's a good deal.
But we haven't seen each other in probably about 3 years, so
yeah, it's time now.
I've gotten pretty thirsty since then.
Yeah.
That's great.
Amazing.
Then we'll have to say our ending as usual, Linda. I will always say, till all are one.
May your luster never dull and your wires never cross.
Well, I'll say amen to that. Yes.